The galaxy was falling apart. Systems that once thrived with life were now dark, silent, and empty. The powerful alien empire known as the Torgath had spread like a plague across the stars. Once a peaceful people, the Torgath had grown cruel and merciless in their quest for dominance. Planets were taken one by one, their inhabitants slaughtered or enslaved. Whole civilizations were erased from existence. The Torgath had no mercy, no hesitation. They left nothing behind but ruin and despair. For years, the galaxy had fought back, but it seemed that no one could stop the Torgath. They had advanced technologies that made them almost unstoppable. Their ships were massive, their weapons deadly, and their armies vast. One by one, the great civilizations of the galaxy fell, unable to withstand the relentless march of the Torgath war machine. Entire fleets had been wiped out, and millions of lives had been lost. On the peaceful planet of Eloria, the Elorians had tried to resist, but their efforts were in vain. They were a kind and noble race, known for their wisdom and their dedication to peace. But against the Torgath, peace was a weakness. The Torgath had come to Eloria with overwhelming force. The Elorian cities, once beautiful and full of life, were now reduced to rubble. Their people were either dead or scattered across the stars, forced to flee from their homes. It was then that the last hope of the galaxy was born, a desperate plea for help sent from Eloria itself. The message was brief but clear. We need you. Help us before we are all lost. The message was broadcast across every star system, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear it and answer. The message reached many ears, but most dismissed it as a hopeless cry. The Torgath were too powerful. No one had the strength to stand against them. Even the most powerful empires in the galaxy have been crushed. Who could possibly answer the call? But on Earth, something was different. On a quiet morning, as the sun rose over the peaceful blue planet, a small team of scientists sat in a dark room, analyzing the data they had received. Dr. Lara Pierce, one of Earth's brightest minds, had been working tirelessly for weeks. She had been studying the strange signals that had been coming from deep space, but she had no idea how important this one would be. When the message from Eloria came through, Dr. Pierce's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the desperation in the words. She understood the significance of the message. This was not just a call for help. It was a cry for survival. The scientist immediately reached out to her colleagues, urging them to take the message to the world's leaders. At first, they hesitated. Earth had never been involved in galactic conflicts before. Their technology was not as advanced as the other civilizations, and they had no military experience in space warfare. They were a young species, still learning how to navigate the stars. But Dr. Pierce was determined. She knew that Earth couldn't just sit by and do nothing. The galaxy needed help, and Earth might be the only chance left. It wasn't just about saving Eloria. It was about saving everyone. She convinced the global governments to take action. They would form a coalition to respond to the call. It was a risky move, but there was no other choice. The Earth's best minds and military leaders came together, working around the clock to prepare for a mission they had never imagined possible. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the Elorian people were on the brink of extinction. Their final stronghold was about to fall to the Torgath, and their hope was all but gone. They had sent out their message as a last-ditch effort, knowing that it might be too late. But they could not give up. If there was even the smallest chance that help might come, they had to take it. And then, after years of suffering, when all hope seemed lost, the message that had been sent from Eloria found its way to Earth. The decision was made. Humanity would answer the call. As Earth's leaders gathered to prepare, Dr. Pierce stood at the front of the room, watching as humanity's first interstellar fleet was being constructed. Ships were being built, weapons designed, and a plan of action was put in place. There was fear, yes, but there was also hope. Earth had never faced an enemy like the Torgath, but they had faced challenges before. And every time, they had found a way to overcome. Captain Jack Rivers, a seasoned war hero, was chosen to lead the mission. He was a man of few words, but his reputation as a fearless leader had earned him the trust of Earth's military. He knew the odds were slim, but he also knew something else. Humanity had the will to fight. If anyone could turn the tide, it was them. The fleet was ready. The journey would be long and dangerous, but Earth was about to make its mark on the galaxy. As the ships launched from the surface of Earth, heading into the unknown, Dr. Pierce watched with a sense of pride and fear. She knew that humanity was taking its first steps into a much larger universe, and the fate of millions now rested on their shoulders. But for the first time in years, there was a spark of hope in the darkness. Humanity had heard the call, and they were coming to answer. On Earth, life continued as usual. People went about their daily routines, unaware of the desperate plea that had just reached the galaxy's furthest corners. The planet was a mix of bustling cities, peaceful countrysides, and the endless blue oceans. The people of Earth had always focused on their own world, solving problems that were close to home. But in the quiet corners of Earth's scientific community, the message from Aloria had sparked something different, a sense of urgency that no one could ignore. Dr. Lara Pierce sat at her desk in the dimly lit control room, surrounded by a team of scientists. They were reviewing the latest data from space, trying to make sense of the mysterious signals they had been receiving. Earth had detected many strange messages in the past, but nothing like this. The words were clear, unmistakable. Aloria was dying, and its people needed help. This wasn't just a call for aid. It was a final cry for survival. As the last few words of the message echoed in her mind, Dr. Pierce felt a chill run down her spine. The Alorians were asking for help, and Earth was the only one left who might have the strength to answer. She quickly shared the message with the scientific community, but at first, there was disbelief. Many couldn't understand how Earth could make a difference in a war so far from home. The Torgheth Empire was vast and powerful, its reach stretching across countless star systems. What could Earth possibly offer? Earth's space technology was still in its infancy compared to the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. They had no fleet, no war experience in the stars, and no allies to call upon. It was a daunting situation. Dr. Pierce refused to give up. She reached out to Earth's leaders, urging them to take the message seriously. If there was any hope of saving the galaxy, it lay in their hands. Despite the skepticism, the global leaders soon realized the truth. The galaxy was on the brink of collapse, and if no one stood against the Torgheth, it would soon be too late. Earth's leaders knew that humanity had always found a way to survive, no matter how impossible the odds. Perhaps this was their moment to prove themselves on the galactic stage. After days of meetings and discussions, Earth's governments reached a decision. They would send a fleet to help the Alorians. They didn't know how they would win, but they knew they couldn't sit by and do nothing. They couldn't let the galaxy fall into darkness. The news spread like wildfire. People all over the world were stunned. Earth was going to war, not just for its own survival, but for the survival of entire civilizations. The sense of unity that had eluded Earth for so long suddenly became tangible. Countries put aside their differences. Resources were pooled together. The best minds of Earth, scientists, engineers, strategists, and military leaders, came together to make the mission possible. Dr. Pierce became a key figure in the planning. Her knowledge of alien technology, space travel, and communication networks made her invaluable. She worked day and night, coordinating with Earth's military and technological experts to create the best possible strategy. The task ahead seemed impossible, but Dr. Pierce was driven by a single thought. They had to succeed, or the galaxy would be lost. In the days that followed, Earth's first interstellar fleet took shape. Massive ships were built, armed with powerful weapons designed to face the Torgheth's advanced forces. Training exercises were held, with Earth's soldiers and pilots preparing for the challenges they would face. It wasn't enough to simply reach Aloria. they would need to fight a war they had never imagined. The fleet would be led by Captain Jack Rivers, a veteran of Earth's military. He was a man who had seen countless battles and had earned a reputation for his courage and leadership. But even he had doubts. How could humanity stand up to the Torgheth, who had crushed civilizations far older and more powerful? The odds seemed impossible. But Captain Rivers was a man who never backed down from a fight, no matter how difficult. As the fleet prepared for launch, Earth's people watched with a mix of hope and fear. They had no idea what lay ahead, but they knew that the future of the galaxy was now in their hands. The journey to Eloria would take months, and the dangers they faced along the way were unknown. But Earth's resolve was strong. This was not just a mission to help a distant planet. It was a mission to prove that humanity, no matter how young or small, had the strength to stand up against the darkness of the universe. The fleet's departure was a moment of both pride and sorrow. Families gathered in the streets, waving to the ships as they launched into space. The faces of the soldiers, scientists, and leaders aboard the ships were filled with determination. They had no choice but to succeed. As the ships disappeared into the stars, the world held its breath, hoping against hope that humanity's answer would be enough. Dr. Pierce stood on the platform, watching as the fleet ascended into the sky. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was humanity's chance to show the galaxy what they were made of. It wasn't just about technology or power. It was about heart. It was about hope, the very thing that had been lost for so long. And with that, Earth had answered the call. The journey into the stars was long, and the fleet was a small but determined beacon of humanity's hope. As the ships sailed further into the galaxy, Earth's crew settled into their new reality. They had left their homes behind, but they carried something far more valuable: courage and a belief that they could make a difference. The fleet's mission was not just about defending a single planet. It was about standing up to the darkness that threatened to consume the galaxy. Captain Jack Rivers stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the Resolute. His hands gripped the railing as he stared at the endless expanse of space outside the window. The stars twinkled in the distance, distant and cold, like the graveyards of countless lost worlds. But he didn't let fear creep into his mind. The future of millions rested on their shoulders, and he would not let them fail. Beside him, Dr. Laura Pierce observed the readings on her console. She had been working closely with the military, using her scientific expertise to help design weapons and systems that would be effective against the Torgheth. She knew the risks of their mission, but she also knew that humanity's ingenuity had always been its greatest strength. They might not have the firepower of the Torgheth, but they had something better: the ability to adapt, to learn, and to surprise. The fleet continued its journey through the blackness of space, leaving Earth behind as they crossed light years. As they approached the outer rim of the galaxy, a silence fell over the crew. No one spoke much, lost in their own thoughts about the challenges ahead. The reality was that they were entering a dangerous unknown. They had no idea what kind of reception they would face when they reached Eloria. Would they be able to reach the planet in time? Would the Elorian still be alive? Days turned into weeks, and still, the ships traveled deeper into enemy territory. They passed through uncharted systems, where strange alien species observed them from the shadows. The fleet's commanders held their breath, knowing that at any moment they could be ambushed. But nothing came. The Torgheth had no idea they were coming. Yet, finally, as the fleet reached the edge of Eloria's star system, the tension on board became almost unbearable. The communication systems were fully activated, but no word had come from Eloria since the initial distress call. The silence was deafening. Were the Torgheth already there, wiping out the last remnants of the Elorian people? Or was the planet still holding out, awaiting their arrival? "Captain, we're entering the orbit of Eloria," said Lieutenant Zara Duval, a young pilot who had quickly earned Captain Rivers' trust. She was monitoring the sensors, her hand steady even though her mind raced. She could feel the weight of their mission, just like everyone else. Rivers nodded. Keep us on course, Lieutenant. We'll be there in minutes." His voice was calm, but inside, he felt a rising tide of fear and determination. This was it. This was where they would either find victory or face the full wrath of the Torgoth. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. The Elorians had been alone for far too long. To hear someone from a far-off planet, offer help was a balm to their wounds. It wasn't just the promise of military support that mattered. It was the belief that they didn't have to carry the burden alone anymore. Mirak studied her for a long moment. He had seen many people come and go, each promising the impossible. But something about Dr. Pierce's sincerity made him pause. He nodded slowly, a small sign of agreement. "Follow us," Mirak said, turning on his heel. "We'll show you what's left of our resistance." As they walked through the ruins of Eloria's once great capital, Captain Rivers couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The Elorians had fought valiantly, using every resource at their disposal to hold off the Torgoth. Their makeshift hideouts, hidden in the remnants of shattered buildings, told the story of a people who refused to give up, even when everything seemed lost. The resistance had set up a command center beneath the ground, a series of tunnels and chambers carved into the planet's rocky surface. It wasn't much, but it was safe from the Torgoth's relentless assaults. The humans followed Mirak and his team, navigating through the labyrinth of tunnels until they reached a central room. Here, a map of Eloria and the surrounding systems was displayed on a holographic table, flickering in the dim light. Mirak gestured to the map. "This is what we have left. The Torgoth are coming again. We believe they're preparing for a final assault on what little we have left. If they succeed, it will be the end of our people." Dr. Pierce leaned over the table, examining the map closely. The Torgoth were relentless, and it was clear that their forces outnumbered the Elorians by far. But she also noticed something else. There were small pockets of Elorian forces still active, still holding strong against overwhelming odds. They hadn't given up, and neither could the humans. "We're not just going to defend," Dr. Pierce said, raising her head. "We're going to take the fight to them." Captain Rivers turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. It was a bold statement, but in that moment, he knew it was the only option. "How?" Dr. Pierce's face softened with determination. "We'll use your knowledge of the Torgoth. We have technology that could give us the upper hand, but we need to hit them where it hurts. Strike fast, hit hard." The resistance fighters listened intently, their eyes wide with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Could the humans really do what they promised? Could they turn the tide of war? Mirak spoke again, his voice quieter now. "The Torgoth are not just a military force. They have something more dangerous, an ancient weapon buried deep within our planet. It's been dormant for centuries, but we believe they know how to unlock its power." The room fell silent. An ancient weapon. That was something none of them had anticipated. Dr. Pierce exchanged a glance with Captain Rivers. This mission had just become much more complicated, but there was no turning back now. Earth had answered the call. They would stand by the Elorians, no matter what lay ahead. Captain Rivers placed a hand on Mirak's shoulder, giving him a reassuring smile. "We'll help you destroy it. Together, we'll end this war." The resistance fighters, once doubtful, now found themselves filled with renewed hope. The humans had come, and for the first time in a long time, they believed that victory was possible. The news about the ancient weapon buried deep within Eloria spread quickly through the resistance camp. The Torgoth had discovered something dangerous, something that could turn the tide of the war in their favor. And now, Captain Rivers, Dr. Pierce, and the Elorians had to work together to uncover its secrets before the enemy could unleash its power. The hidden weapon was not just any ordinary tool of destruction. According to Mirak, the Elorian leader, it was an artifact from a time long before their civilization had flourished. It was said to have been sealed away by their ancestors, kept hidden for reasons that had been lost to history. But the Torgoth, with their advanced technology, had found a way to locate it. "We need to act quickly," Mirak said, his voice urgent. "The Torgath are closing in. If they unlock the weapon's power, our chances of survival are slim." Captain Rivers nodded, determination in his eyes. "We won't let that happen." Dr. Pierce, ever the scientist, was already calculating the best way to approach the situation. "We need to find the weapon's location and get there before the Torgath can. We'll need to work with your best archaeologists and engineers. This isn't just a military operation. It's a race against time." The Elorians had long since given up on the idea of recovering their past. Their history was mostly oral, passed down through generations, but the exact details of where the weapon lay hidden had been lost to the ages. However, there was a clue that they held onto, a set of ancient markings found in an abandoned temple. The markings were written in a language that even the Elorians could barely understand. A small team, including Dr. Pierce, Captain Rivers, Mirak, and a handful of the brightest Elorian engineers, set off for the temple. It was located deep in the heart of Eloria's most dangerous terrain, a place where the Torgath had already ravaged, leaving behind nothing but rubble and devastation. The journey would be treacherous, but they had no other choice. As their convoy of vehicles made its way through the rocky landscape, the tension was thick. The sounds of distant explosions echoed in the background, a reminder of the Torgath's relentless assault on Eloria. The team pressed forward, unwilling to stop until they reached their destination. Hours later, they arrived at the temple. It was a towering structure, its stone walls weathered by centuries of neglect, but still standing strong. The temple had been built into the side of a cliff, and its entrance was obscured by overgrowth. As they approached, Captain Rivers took a deep breath. It felt like they were about to step into the heart of Eloria's ancient past. Mirak stepped forward, placing his hand on the temple's weathered door. "This is where it all began," he murmured. "Our ancestors sealed away the weapon to protect the future." With a grunt of effort, the door slowly creaked open, revealing a dark, shadowy interior. The air inside was thick with dust, and the smell of age and decay hung in the atmosphere. Dr. Pierce pulled out a small flashlight, casting a beam of light into the dark corridor. "We'll need to be careful," she said, her voice steady. "The temple may be ancient, but it's likely still rigged with traps from when it was sealed." The group proceeded cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the hollow halls. The walls were covered in strange carvings and symbols that seemed to tell the story of Eloria's past. Dr. Pierce examined them closely, trying to decipher any clues that might lead them to the weapon. But the symbols were written in a language that she had never encountered before. "We'll have to rely on the Elorians to interpret this," Dr. Pierce said, glancing at Mirak. "It's beyond me." Mirak studied the carvings intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I've seen these symbols before," he said slowly. "They're part of an ancient ritual, one that was used to seal the weapon away." As Mirak spoke, the group reached the inner sanctum of the temple. There they found a large stone pedestal, at the center of which was an ornate box. The box was covered in intricate carvings, and it hummed with an eerie energy that seemed to pulse in time with the beating of their hearts. "This is it," Mirak whispered. "The weapon is inside." Dr. Pierce stepped forward cautiously, her hands trembling with anticipation. She could feel the weight of history bearing down on her. The box was unlike anything she had ever seen, and it seemed to defy the natural laws of physics. "We need to be very careful," she said. "We don't know what kind of power this thing holds." Captain Rivers nodded, his face set in determination. "We'll get it open, whatever it takes." The group worked together, carefully removing the box from its pedestal. It was heavier than it looked, and the moment they touched it, the energy inside the temple seemed to change. The air grew colder, and a low hum began to resonate from the box, as if it were awakening from a long slumber. "We've triggered something," Mirak said, his voice tense. Dr. Pierce held her breath as she examined the box's intricate locking mechanism. "If we don't open it correctly, we might trigger the weapon's power without knowing how to control it." Captain Rivers didn't have time to wait for perfect conditions. The Torgath were closing in, and they had to act quickly. We don't have much time. We open it now, or the Torgath will do it for us. With a final twist, the box opened, revealing a glowing object inside. A crystal that pulsed with an otherworldly light. The moment the crystal was exposed, the ground beneath them rumbled, and a wave of energy shot out, spreading throughout the temple. "We've unleashed something," Dr. Pierce whispered, her eyes wide with fear. The weapon was awake, and they had no idea what it would do next. As the crystal pulsed with an eerie light, the air around them seemed to hum with energy. The stone walls of the temple trembled slightly, and a low, resonant sound filled the chamber. Dr. Pierce felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen advanced technology before, but nothing like this. The power that radiated from the crystal was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Captain Rivers stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon, though he wasn't sure it would help against whatever was coming. "We need to move quickly. The Torgath are close." Mirok, the Aelorian leader, looked at the glowing crystal with wide eyes. "This is not just a weapon. It's something else." Dr. Pierce, carefully observing the crystal, frowned. "What do you mean by something else?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. Mirok took a deep breath, his voice steady but filled with awe. "The legends speak of an ancient force that could alter the very fabric of time and space. The weapon is more than a tool of war. It's a key to something far more powerful." Captain Rivers clenched his fists, his mind racing. The Torgath had no idea what they were dealing with. Neither did they. But they had no choice now. The weapon was awake, and they had to figure out how to control it before it fell into the wrong hands. "We don't have much time," he said. "We need to understand this thing and fast." Dr. Pierce nodded, her scientific curiosity now mixed with urgency. "We need to figure out what this crystal does before we use it. It could be our last hope, or it could be our undoing." Mirok stepped closer to the crystal, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of reverence and fear. "We should try to understand its purpose. There are ancient texts, hidden documents in our archives, that might offer answers, but they're in ruins now, and we may not have enough time." Captain Rivers glanced over at Dr. Pierce, who was already analyzing the crystal. She pulled out a small device from her pack, hoping to scan it and get some data. The moment the device activated, the crystal responded. The light grew brighter, and the hum intensified. The room vibrated with energy. "I'm getting readings," Dr. Pierce said, her voice tense. "This isn't like any energy signature I've ever encountered. It's almost alive." Mirok took a step back, eyes wide. "It's been dormant for so long. The energy, it must have been waiting for something." Captain Rivers didn't have time for speculation. "If it's waiting for something, we don't know how much longer we have. Let's figure out how to use it." They all stood in silence for a moment, contemplating their next move. The humming of the crystal became louder, vibrating in their chests, and the temperature in the room seemed to rise. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them, more violently than before. The walls cracked, dust falling from the ceiling. The vibrations made it harder to stay on their feet. The group looked at each other, realizing that the Torgath had arrived. "We've got company," Captain Rivers said, his voice grim. Mirok quickly looked around the chamber. "We need to get out of here. The Torgath won't hesitate to destroy this place." But as the group moved toward the exit, the crystal's glow intensified, and an unseen force stopped them in their tracks. It wasn't a physical barrier, but an invisible pressure in the air that held them in place. "What's happening?" Dr. Pierce gasped. Mirok's expression changed. "It's activating. The weapon is choosing its path. We can't stop it now." As if to confirm his words, the crystal's light expanded outward, filling the entire room with a dazzling glow. The walls of the temple began to tremble even more violently. And then suddenly, the light shot out in every direction, engulfing the group. For a split second, Captain Rivers thought they had been struck by some kind of weapon. But the pain never came. Instead, a strange sensation overwhelmed them, like they were being pulled in every direction at once. When the light finally dimmed, everything was different. The temple was gone. The ground they had stood on was replaced by a vast, starry expanse. They were no longer on Eloria. They were somewhere else entirely. "This isn't possible," Dr. Pierce whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. They were standing in space itself, surrounded by countless stars. But they weren't floating in the void. They were standing on solid ground, a platform suspended in the emptiness of space. "This is the power the crystal holds," Mirok said, his voice distant. "It has opened a doorway, a gateway." Captain Rivers felt his heart race. A gateway to where? Mirok didn't respond immediately. He was looking around, as if trying to make sense of their surroundings. This is the ancient network. It's a bridge between worlds. It connects Eloria to other parts of the galaxy, maybe even other dimensions. Dr. Pierce's voice trembled as she spoke. "So this is what the weapon is. It's not just a weapon. It's a portal." Captain Rivers nodded, understanding dawning on him. And if the Torgeth get their hands on this, they could invade entire worlds. Suddenly, a distant noise interrupted their conversation. A low, rumbling sound that grew louder with each passing second. Captain Rivers turned to see a massive ship emerging from the depths of space. Its hull was marked with the Torgeth insignia. The enemy was here. "We don't have much time," Captain Rivers said, looking at his team. "We need to figure out how to use this portal, or we'll lose everything." They had found the key to saving their world. But now, they had to figure out how to control it before the Torgeth did. The massive Torgeth ship loomed in the distance, its dark hull blocking out the stars behind it. The hum of its engines could be heard, a low growl that made the very ground beneath them tremble. Captain Rivers knew that they had only moments before the enemy arrived on the platform with them. The crystal's power had transported them to this strange place, but it hadn't provided any answers. The portal was a mystery, one that they needed to unlock fast. "We need to get to the crystal," Dr. Pierce said, her voice urgent. "We have to control it before the Torgeth can destroy everything." Captain Rivers nodded, his mind racing. They had no idea how the portal worked, but they had no choice. The Torgeth were relentless, and if they took control of the crystal, it could mean the end of the galaxy. He motioned for Mirok to stay close. "Let's move," he ordered. They ran across the platform, the strange energy from the crystal making the ground beneath their feet pulse with every step. The stars above flickered, as if in response to their movements. It felt like the very air around them was alive, charged with energy that was both alien and ancient. Captain Rivers didn't have time to think about the strange sensations. He focused solely on reaching the crystal. The rumble of the Torgeth ship grew louder. The enemy was close, very close. "We can't let them reach the crystal," Mirok said, his voice filled with determination. "It's our only chance." As they neared the crystal's pedestal, the air around them seemed to thicken. A force, both gentle and powerful, pushed against them, as if the very presence of the Torgeth ship was creating an opposing energy. Captain Rivers felt his heart race. "Do you feel that?" Dr. Pierce asked, looking around. Mirok nodded. "The weapon is reacting. The crystal has sensed the Torgeth threat." The crystal's light flickered as the Torgeth ship drew closer, casting eerie shadows across the platform. The ground beneath them trembled again, but this time it was different. It was as though the very fabric of the space around them was warping. "We're almost there," Captain Rivers said, though his voice was thick with tension. Just as they reached the pedestal, a loud crack filled the air, followed by a blast of intense energy. The Torgeth had arrived. A group of Torgeth soldiers descended from the ship, their armored figures landing with a heavy thud on the platform. They looked around, their eyes scanning for their targets. Captain Rivers instinctively moved to stand in front of Dr. Pierce. ready to protect her. But Mirak stepped forward, his gaze focused on the soldiers. "This is our world," Mirak shouted, his voice full of fury. "You will not take it from us." The Torgheth soldiers didn't hesitate. They raised their weapons and began firing at the group. Captain Rivers dove to the side, narrowly avoiding a blast. The platform lit up with the energy from the Torgheth weapons, sparks flying as the beams collided with the ground. "We need to activate the crystal," Dr. Pierce shouted. "Now." Mirak rushed to the pedestal, placing his hands on the crystal. The moment he made contact, a shockwave of energy erupted from the crystal, knocking the Torgheth soldiers off their feet. They scrambled to regain their footing, but the power of the crystal had already begun to warp the space around them. "This is it," Mirak said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "We can use the crystal to send them away. If we activate the portal, we can send the Torgheth back to their home world. But we have to be quick," Dr. Pierce warned. Captain Rivers turned to Mirak. "Do it. Now." Mirak nodded and focused all his energy on the crystal. The light grew brighter, almost blinding, and the air around them hummed with power. The Torgheth soldiers fired again, but their blasts were deflected by the intense energy from the crystal. The platform began to shake, the stars above them swirling in a dizzying display of lights. "The portal is opening," Mirak shouted. A rip in the fabric of space appeared before them, a swirling vortex that pulsed with energy. The Torgheth soldiers, realizing their fate, began to retreat toward their ship, but it was too late. The portal sucked them in, pulling them off the platform and into the unknown. As the last Torgheth soldier vanished into the portal, the vortex began to close, the air around them stilling. Captain Rivers took a deep breath, his body tense with the aftermath of the battle. The platform was quiet again, but the cost had been high. The Torgheth were gone. For now. "We did it," Dr. Pierce said, her voice soft with disbelief. Mirak stepped away from the pedestal, his eyes scanning the now peaceful space around them. "We have to make sure they don't come back." Captain Rivers turned to Mirak. "We will. We have the crystal. We can control the portal now." Dr. Pierce looked at the crystal, her expression filled with wonder. "This is just the beginning. The power we have, if we use it wisely, could change everything." Captain Rivers nodded. "We've saved our world, but we can't stop here. There are still others out there who need our help. And now we have the means to reach them." The group stood together, staring at the crystal in the center of the platform. The Torgheth were gone, and the galaxy had been saved for now. But the real work was just beginning. With the power of the crystal in their hands, humanity was ready to face whatever came next. And as they looked out into the vast expanse of space, they knew one thing for certain. Humanity would answer the call, no matter what.